Beauty thought the worst thing that happened to her was losing the opportunity, but she was wrong. The worst part was what came after. She didn't just lose money, she lost her voice, her confidence, her fire, and for 5 years, she lived like someone who had already failed. Beauty still went to church every Sunday, sometimes midweek. She showed up, she sat down, she listened. But something had changed. The same words that used to stir her spirit now passed through her like noise. The same presence of God she once felt deeply now felt distant. Not because God had moved, but because something in her had closed. She sang when others sang. She bowed her head when others prayed. She even said amen. But inside, she felt disconnected, like someone standing outside a door, watching others experience something she used to know. And the truth was, she didn't feel worthy anymore. Worthy to ask, worthy to believe, worthy to expect anything good again. Because every time she tried, one memory came back. That decision, that moment, that loss. You had your chance, and you wasted it. The voice didn't shout. It didn't accuse loudly. It just whispered, constantly. And over time, she believed it. She stopped dreaming the way she used to, stopped planning, stopped expecting anything beyond what she already had. Because in her mind, this was now her level. This was where life had placed her. After everything, even her prayers changed. They became shorter, safer, less expectant. No more bold requests, no more specific visions. Just, God, help me manage. God, let today go well. God, just be with me. Not because she didn't believe in God, but because she didn't trust herself anymore. And when you don't trust yourself, it becomes hard to trust what God can do through you. Sarah had tried to reach her, many times. Calls, messages, voice notes. But Beauty always responded late, or not at all. Not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of shame. Because how do you explain to someone that you ignored the very advice that could have saved you? How do you face someone who warned you and was right? So instead, she stayed away. Until one day, Sarah came back, not just back into the country, but back into her life. She had tried calling again, no response. And then she remembered something. If I can't reach her, I know where I will find her. Church, that Sunday. Beauty walked in like every other Sunday, quiet, composed, unnoticed. She found her usual seat, sat down, tried to settle into the service. Then suddenly, she heard a voice, "Beauty!" She froze. Slowly, she turned, and there she was, Sarah, standing right in front of her. For a moment, time stood still. No words, just recognition, then emotion, real, unfiltered emotion. "Sarah!" Beauty whispered. And in the next second, she stood up and held her, tightly, not politely, not casually, but like someone who had been carrying something heavy for far too long. And in that embrace, everything she had buried for 5 years started to rise again. They pulled away slowly, but not completely, because some reunions carry too much history to be casual. Sarah looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, she saw it. Not the clothes, not the composure, not the "I'm okay" posture. She saw the weight. "Beauty," she said softly, "what happened to you?" That question broke something open. Not immediately, but enough. Beauty forced a small smile. "I'm fine," she said. Sarah didn't respond. She just kept looking at her. And somehow, that silence said more than words ever could. After service, they stepped outside, found a quiet corner. For a moment, Beauty didn't know where to start, because how do you summarize 5 years of regret into a few sentences? "I'm sorry," she said finally. Sarah frowned slightly. "Sorry for what?" Beauty looked down. Her fingers tightened around each other. "I should have listened to you." Silence. "I knew you were right," she continued, her voice shaking. "But I didn't listen." Her eyes filled with tears. "I lost everything, Sarah." Now Sarah spoke. "But you didn't lose everything." Beauty shook her head. You don't understand. I disappointed my brother. I wasted the opportunity God gave me. I ignored you." Her voice broke. "And I can't forgive myself." That was it, the real problem. Not the money, not the delay. Herself. Sarah took a deep breath, then stepped closer. "Beauty," she said, firmer now. "Look at me." Slowly, Beauty lifted her eyes. "What you did was wrong," Sarah said plainly. Beauty nodded immediately, tears falling now. "But why are you still living there?" Beauty blinked. "Why are you still sitting in a moment that God has already moved past?" She was quiet. "You made a mistake," Sarah continued. "Yes, but you've turned it into a prison." Those words landed. "You didn't just lose money," Sarah said. "You lost yourself." Beauty's breathing slowed. "Do you know what regret does?" Sarah went on. "It makes you small. It makes you hide. It convinces you that you don't deserve another chance." Tears streamed down Beauty's face, because every word was true. "You think you're being humble," Sarah said, "but you're actually stuck." That one hit differently. "God forgave you," she continued. "Mercy has followed you for 5 years. You're still standing. You're still working. You're still moving." She paused. "So why are you punishing yourself for something God has already forgiven?" Beauty couldn't speak, because for the first time, she saw it clearly. All these years, she hadn't just been rebuilding her business. She had been holding herself hostage. "And Isaac," Sarah added. Beauty stiffened slightly. "I never even..." She hesitated. "I didn't end it properly." Sarah's expression changed. "Of course you didn't," she said quietly, "because he was never meant to stay." Beauty looked confused. "That voice," Sarah said, "the one that pushed you away from what God told you, that wasn't love." Silence. "And after everything that happened," Sarah continued, "where is he now?" Beauty swallowed. "I don't know. Calls unanswered, messages ignored, gone." And suddenly, what she once held onto emotionally looked very different. Not deep, not meaningful, just a distraction she gave too much power to. That realization stung, but it also freed something. Sarah softened her tone. "Beauty, you have to forgive yourself." Beauty shook her head slightly. "I don't know how." Sarah reached for her hand. "You start by agreeing with God." She paused. "If he has not condemned you, you don't get to condemn yourself." Tears fell freely now. "Let it go," Sarah said gently. "Not because it didn't matter, but because holding it is costing you more." That moment worry changed something. Not everything at once, but enough. Enough for a crack to form in the weight she had carried for years. And for the first time in a long time, Beauty felt something she hadn't felt in years. Light, not fully free, but no longer completely bound. That evening, Sarah prayed with her. Not casually, not lightly, but deeply, like she used to. And as the words flowed, something began to break. Not outside, inside. Years of guilt, shame, silence, loosening, releasing. And for the first time in 5 years, Beauty didn't just cry from regret, she cried from release. That night didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the past. It didn't suddenly restore what was lost. But it did something more important. It shifted her heart. The next morning felt different, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just lighter. For the first time in years, Beauty woke up without that immediate weight sitting on her chest. The thoughts were still there. The memories hadn't disappeared, but they no longer held the same power. And that was where the healing began. Sarah didn't leave immediately. She stayed, not just physically, but intentionally. She took Beauty out, made her laugh again, made her talk again, not about business, not about mistakes, just life. Because somewhere along the way, Beauty had forgotten how to live without pressure. They sat in quiet places, shared small meals, walked without rushing, and slowly, piece by piece, Beauty began to come back to herself. Not the version of her from before the mistake, but a new version, more aware, more grounded, more careful. One afternoon, Sarah showed up with something. It wasn't wrapped. It wasn't announced. She simply brought it in. A new industrial sewing machine. Beauty stared at it, confused, then shocked. "Sarah, I know," Sarah said gently. "You've been working, but you've been holding back." Beauty didn't speak. "Not because you can't do more," Sarah continued, "but because you've been afraid to try again." Silence. "This is not just a machine," Sarah said. "It's a reminder. A reminder that your story didn't end there." Tears filled Beauty's eyes, because she understood. This wasn't just help, it was belief. Someone still believed in her, even when she had stopped believing in herself. That day, something settled inside her, a quiet decision. "I'm not going to stay here anymore. Not in regret, not in fear, not in hesitation." She didn't make a loud declaration. She didn't announce anything. But internally, she chose to rise again. And this time, she did it differently. She returned to her work, but not passively, not just to survive. She became intentional again. She reviewed her pricing, improved her finishing, paid attention to details she once ignored. She cleaned her space, organized her tools, created structure. Then, she did something she had avoided for years. She showed up online. At first, it felt uncomfortable. Posting her work again, putting herself out there again, but she did it anyway. One post, then another, no pressure, just consistency. And slowly, people began to notice. Old customers returned, new ones came. Referrals increased, not overnight, but steadily. And this time, she didn't rush. She didn't chase quick wins, didn't look for shortcuts. She built, carefully, with time. She moved again, from that small space to something bigger, not extravagant, but structured, intentional. She added more machines, improved her setup, took her business seriously, and more importantly, she took God seriously again, not just in words, but in decisions. She prayed before choices, waited for clarity, sought peace before action. Even when opportunities came, she paused because she had learned not every opportunity is alignment. And then came another test. Men started coming, good men, serious men, interested men. But Beauty was no longer the same. She didn't rush, didn't attach easily, didn't ignore her convictions. Because this time, she understood the cost of choosing wrong. Still, there was someone who had always been there, quietly, respectfully. His name was Ethan. He didn't force conversations, didn't try to impress her, but he was consistent, kind, grounded, different. At first, she barely noticed him, but over time, she did. And this time, she didn't open her heart carelessly. She prayed, asked God questions she had never asked before, waited, observed, and slowly, she allowed herself to trust again, not blindly, but wisely. Ethan supported her, not with pressure, not with control, but with alignment. And one day, he mentioned something. A grant. Beauty paused. The word alone brought back memories, but this time, it felt different. "This is not fast money," he explained. "It's structured. You apply, you build, you present." She hesitated, then prayed. And this time, she moved with clarity. She applied. The first time, she didn't get it. The second time, still nothing. The third, the fifth, the seventh, rejection. But something had changed. She didn't break. She improved, adjusted her applications, refined her vision, strengthened her presentation, and through it all, Ethan stayed, encouraging, helping, standing with her, not taking over, just supporting. Then one day, after another application, she got the email. She opened it, heart racing. And there it was. She got it. The grant. A significant amount. Not rushed, not lost, earned. Tears filled her eyes. Because this time, she didn't just receive an opportunity, she was ready for it. And when Daniel heard, he was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Not out of surprise, but recognition. She had changed. And this time, so had the outcome. Because this time, beauty didn't just have opportunity. She had wisdom, she had healing, she had alignment, and finally, she had become the woman who could carry what she once lost. God didn't just restore her opportunity, He restored her. The grant changed things, not overnight, but significantly. For the first time in years, beauty was not just surviving, she was building. She used the money carefully, not emotionally, not impulsively. She went back to something she had once done before. She wrote a plan, but this time it was different. Not just ambition, but wisdom. She structured everything. Expansion of her workspace, additional machines, hiring trained staff, proper record systems, branding and positioning. Every decision was intentional. Every step was thought through. Because this time, she understood something she didn't before. Opportunity is not enough. You must be ready for it. Her business grew bigger. Customers increased. Orders became consistent. Her name started to carry weight. She wasn't just Beauty who can sew anymore. She became Beauty, the designer. With time, she expanded again. A bigger space, better equipment, a structured team, and eventually as something she never imagined before. People began to consult her. Young designers, beginners, people who reminded her of herself. And for the first time, her pain found purpose. Because now, she had something to say. Not theory, not motivation, experience. I once had everything I prayed for, she would say quietly, and I lost it. The room would go silent. But that wasn't the end of my story, because now she could speak from both sides. Loss and restoration. One evening, she went to see her brother, not as the girl who failed him, but as a woman who had grown. "I'm sorry," she said, not dramatically, not defensively, just honestly. "For what I did and for how I handled it." Daniel looked at her, then nodded. "I know," he said, "and I'm proud of you." Emotions ran through her spine. Tears gathered in her eyes. That was all she needed to hear. No long speech, no tension, just closure. And from that day, their relationship changed. Not back to what it was before, but into something stronger. Respect. Daniel became an investor in her fashion business. Ethan remained, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because he had always been consistent. And this time, Beauty was different. She didn't ignore red flags, didn't rush emotions, didn't silence her spirit. She prayed, waited, observed. And when she finally said yes, it wasn't out of loneliness, it was out of peace. Years later, Beauty stood in a space that once only existed in her imagination. A fully functional fashion brand, structured, recognized, respected, machines running, staff working, orders flowing. But if you asked her what changed everything, she wouldn't say the grant, the business, the connections. She would say, "I learned to listen, to God, to wisdom, and to the right voices." Because in the end, Beauty didn't just lose an opportunity, she learned from it. She didn't just rebuild her business, she rebuilt herself. And this time, when opportunity came again, she didn't lose it. She became the kind of woman who could carry it. Sometimes God will allow you lose what you prayed for, so you can become who you need to be, to handle it when it comes again. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever made a decision you regret, or you're learning how to forgive yourself and start again, or this story reminded you that God is still merciful, even after mistakes, type grace in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share, because we're telling more stories that heal, restore, and remind you that God is not done with you yet.